Because of your generosity tonight, we have exceeded our wildest expectations. Thank you all.
My father raised a glass of red wine in front of 300 people and said my name the way you announce a mistake. He stood under the crystal chandeliers in a perfectly tailored tux, his smile polished, sharp, like a scalpel fresh off the stone. I was pressed against the back wall of the ballroom where the light didn't quite reach, and I heard him say the sentence that made my skin feel like it had been burned. "That girl isn't my daughter," he said. "She's just a cleaner, a trash collector for society." Laughter burst out, thick, rolling, metallic, bouncing off marble like loose ball bearings. Women tightened their fingers around champagne flutes. Men traded amused looks. Someone actually turned to stare at me, like I was the surprise entertainment of the night. I didn't cry. I had already spent a lifetime crying in places no one could see. I just gripped the slim folder in my hands and felt the edge of the paper bite into my palm, like a reminder. They didn't know I was wearing a mic, clipped high and hidden beneath my jacket. They definitely didn't know that inside this folder was the one thing that could turn my father's $25 million fundraiser gala into a courtroom on the spot. My father, Dr. Richard Hale, swept his eyes across the crowd to find me. He wanted to watch me crumble. He wanted me to apologize for stepping off the path he'd carved out for me. His gaze caught me in the shadows near the edge of the room, and his mouth curled in that small, satisfied way it always did, like he'd stepped in something filthy and didn't need to bend down to wipe his shoes. I stepped forward. My heels clicked against the floor, each sound sharp in my ears, like my heartbeat forced into discipline. The air was sweet with expensive perfume, white orchids, grilled meat, and vintage wine. But underneath it all, there was the clean, cold scent of metal, the smell of something about to break. I walked straight toward the stage steps. A security guard watched me, hesitated, then backed off when he realized I wasn't wavering. Maybe my face didn't look like someone coming to cause a scene. Maybe it looked like someone coming to end one. My father lifted the microphone toward his mouth, ready to land one last humiliating punch. I reached out and took the mic from his hand before he could speak. His fingers froze for a beat, just one beat, but it was enough. Control slid out of his grip like something slick and wet. I turned to face the room. The stage lights hit my skin like heat, but I didn't blink. "Good evening," I said, my voice so steady I surprised myself. My father got one thing right. I work with the most vulnerable people in our community. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. Curiosity rose like smoke. But he forgot to mention my title. I let the silence stretch long enough for every set of eyes to hook into me. I looked straight at the front tables, where the donors and city officials sat, faces used to giving orders and being obeyed. Right then, they weren't powerful. They were waiting to see which way power was about to tilt. "I'm a senior program officer with the State Health Foundation," I said, "and my signature is a required condition before a single dollar of funding gets released to the Dignity Recovery Center." I watched my father's face tighten. "The grant Dr. Hale has been chasing since January," I continued, "worth $25 million. The laughter died instantly. Not just silence, something colder, like a wet blanket dropped over a flame. I could hear ice clink in a glass. Someone inhaled too sharply. Someone swallowed like their mouth had gone dry. My father stood beside me, and all the color drained out of him. He tried to smile, but his mouth twitched like it was being pulled by a string. The wine glass in his hand trembled. He wasn't used to being stripped of his role in public. He was always the one directing the room. For the first time, he was just a man standing under bright lights with nowhere to hide. I opened the folder. The soft shuffle of paper sounded loud in the stillness, like a blade sliding out of its sheath. "Let's talk about this proposal," I said. "It reads beautifully. A recovery center for unhoused people and those battling addiction. Very noble. I flipped a page, but I read every line. I flipped another. 80% of the budget is labeled as facility upgrades, imported leather furnishings for executive offices, marble flooring for a private lobby. I looked up and let my gaze sweep across the tables. There is not a single item listed for patient beds. A murmur rose, then caught itself and died again. I turned another page. Administrative transportation, I read. $300,000 for 2 luxury SUVs. I paused. Let it sink. For an organization that claims it exists to serve unhoused people. Someone exhaled hard. A woman at a nearby table set her glass down like she didn't trust her hand. One of the donors leaned in and whispered something to the person beside him. I could almost hear the alliances in my father's world beginning to crack. "This isn't a medical facility," I said, my voice crisp and clear. "This is a plan to polish a reputation and drain public money under the costume of charity." I held up the folder, just enough for the weight of it to feel real. "And because there are indicators of financial misconduct, this proposal is denied, effective immediately." My father let out a strangled little laugh and stepped toward me like he was going to snatch the microphone back. I shifted half a step away, avoiding his hand the way I'd spent years avoiding his moods. "Dr. Hale will not receive a single dollar from the State Health Foundation for this project. Not this month, not this year, not until every irregular expense is explained in front of an audit." I closed the folder. The small click of the cover sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. Then I placed the microphone on the stage floor. The sound hit the speakers, heavy, echoing, like a judge's gavel. I walked down the steps. The crowd parted, making a narrow path without even realizing they were doing it. No one clapped, but no one laughed anymore. The eyes following me weren't amused now. They were the eyes of people who just watched power change hands. I pushed through the door into the staff corridor. The air back there was colder. The smells of industrial cleaner and stainless steel replaced perfume and orchids. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, believing just for a second that it was over. Then the door behind me slammed open. Before I could turn, my father's hand clamped around my wrist. His grip was brutal, tight enough to make my skin burn. His breath hit my face, sour with wine and rage. "Stop," he growled. "No charm left, no public mask. You think you're somebody now?" I didn't answer right away. I just held his stare, and in that moment I knew the truth. Tonight wasn't the ending. Tonight was the door opening. His fingers were still digging into my wrist when I leaned in just enough for him to hear me without the hallway cameras catching my mouth. "Let go," I said again, softer this time, the way you speak to a man holding a knife he thinks he owns. For a second, I saw it in his eyes, pure calculation, not fatherly anger, not wounded pride, risk assessment. Who could see? What story he could tell if someone walked around the corner. Then he loosened his grip like he was doing me a favor, like pain was something he handed out by permission. I rolled my wrist slowly, feeling my pulse throb under the skin. I didn't rub it. I didn't give him that satisfaction. "You think you can do that and walk away?" he snapped. "You don't understand what you just did." I did understand. I understood better than he ever would, because I had built my life in rooms that didn't care about charm, rooms that didn't clap for speeches, rooms where the only thing that mattered was what could be proven. 10 years earlier, I had stood in his library, the one he liked to show off to people who didn't read. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, leather chairs no one sat in, a fireplace that burned whether it needed to or not, just to announce wealth. I had handed him my acceptance letter to a top social work program, my hands trembling the way they do when you're brave and terrified at the same time. I remember the exact sound it made when he took it, paper sliding against his ring. He didn't read the letter. He looked at the heading, then at me, as if someone had told him a joke. "You want to be a janitor for addicts," he said. "It's social work," I whispered, already shrinking. "It's public health." He crushed the letter in his fist, not angrily, casually, like it was trash. "Do it," he said, "but don't you dare expect me to pay for you to ruin yourself." Then he tossed it into the fireplace and watched it curl black at the edges. "The moment you walk out that door," he said, "you're dead to me." I walked out anyway. I thought it would break me. It did, in a way, but the part of me that broke was the part that kept waiting for him to love me. The next few years were ugly and honest. I worked nights at a recovery shelter that smelled like disinfectant, sweat, and old despair. I changed sheets soaked through by withdrawal. I cleaned bathrooms after someone lost everything they had left in their stomach and their soul. I learned how to stay calm when people screamed at me, spit on me, begged me, threatened me, collapsed into my arms. I learned to listen for the tiny shift in someone's voice that meant they were about to do something dangerous. I went to class in the morning with tired eyes and coffee breath, and I studied budgets the way my father studied faces, looking for the weakest point. I ate cheap noodles and pride. My father's world glowed in the distance like a polished billboard. Every few months, I'd see his name in the society pages. Dr. Richard Hale hosts charity event. Dr. Richard Hale donates to Children's Hospital. Dr. Richard Hale honored for community service. He always looked flawless in the photos, smiling in rooms full of people desperate to be close to him. Meanwhile, I was learning what community service looked like when it wasn't a camera angle. I climbed slowly, caseworker, supervisor, regional coordinator. I picked up a master's degree in public administration because I realized the truth no one told you in the shelter. Compassion without control gets eaten alive. The system doesn't move because you care. It moves because you know which lever to pull. Money is a lever. Contracts are levers. And a signature placed in the right box at the right time is the lever that decides whether a program lives or dies. I made it into the State Health Foundation because I was good at the parts of the job that didn't sparkle. I could read a proposal and smell the lie beneath the pretty language. I could follow a budget line the way a bloodhound follows a trail. I could tell the difference between a genuine need and a vanity project wearing a halo. Which is why, 6 months ago, when I opened the grant portal and saw the name of a new applicant, my stomach went cold. Dignity Recovery Center, submitted by Richard Hale. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Then I clicked. The proposal was beautiful, warm language, carefully chosen photographs, a mission statement that could make a donor tear up. He knew how to sell a story. He had always known. It was the same skill he used on patients who wanted to believe a new face could fix an old life. But I didn't read the story. I read the structure. Executive renovation costs disguised as clinical readiness. Transportation packages that belonged to a private practice, not a nonprofit. Consulting fees that flowed to companies with bland names and no public history. Numbers rounded too neatly, like they'd been dressed for church. I could have rejected it quietly, sent a polite note about compliance requirements and moved on, but that would have let him survive with his favorite weapon, narrative. He would have told everyone the state was slow, the state was corrupt, his enemies were jealous. And then he'd have found another pot of money to siphon from, another room of people to charm, another place to make his image shine. I didn't want him inconvenienced. I wanted him exposed. So I did something that would have made my younger self sick with fear. I opened the file, signed off on it, and handed it to my director, who listened to me with the kind of attention you only get when someone knows you're about to hand them a tighter ship. Then, the 2 days before the gala, my phone buzzed with a message from my grandmother. It wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic. He's been calling. He says he'll put me out if you don't behave." My throat tightened so fast it felt like I couldn't swallow. My grandmother had been the only quiet kindness in my childhood. When I left that house, she was the one who slipped a small envelope in my coat pocket with shaking hands and a steady gaze. She didn't say she was proud. She didn't need to. Her fingers on my sleeve said it for her. And now my father was using her like a leash. That was the moment something inside me hardened into steel. Back in the corridor, my father's face was inches from mine. His voice dropped, thick with threat. "You cut off my funding, I cut off your grandmother tonight." I held his stare and let the silence tell him I wasn't flinching. "You really don't know me," I said. His eyes narrowed, like he was trying to recognize a stranger wearing my face. I reached into my purse and wrapped my hand around my phone, not as a shield, more like a key. Because while he was busy performing on stage, I had already done what people like him never think to do. I had built a file, and I had sent it to the one department that doesn't care how famous you are. I looked at my father and spoke the next sentence like a door clicking open. "Check your email. The audit request was filed this morning." The color drained out of his face so fast it almost satisfying. Then his mouth curved into something ugly. "Oh, so that's how you want to play." And I realized I'd just crossed the line where family drama ends and war begins. My father stared at me like he'd never seen my face before. For a moment, the corridor felt too narrow for the air we were breathing. Behind him, the ballroom doors swung open and shut as staff slipped in and out, pretending they weren't hearing anything. That was how the city worked. People didn't intervene. They observed. They waited to see who would win, then pretended they'd always been on the right side. He recovered first. He always did. That was his gift, turning panic into performance. "An audit request," he repeated, like he was tasting the words. Then he gave me a small, almost amused smile. "You filed paperwork. Congratulations." He leaned closer, voice low, intimate, dangerous. "You think that scares me? I've been audited before. I've been sued before. I've buried worse than an audit." I didn't move. I didn't blink. The calm in my chest wasn't courage. It was practice. I'd spent years in rooms where people tried to bully their way out of accountability, and I learned something early. You don't fight a manipulator with emotion. You fight them with documentation. My father's eyes flicked to my wrist where his fingers had bruised the skin. His mouth twitched. "Let me tell you what happens next," he said. "I walk back in there and I tell them you're unstable. I tell them you've got a vendetta. I tell them you were fired from your last position and you're lying about everything." That's a lot of talking for a man who just got his grant denied on stage. His nostrils flared. For a second, I saw the raw animal under the tuxedo, the man who didn't see people, only obstacles. Then he straightened his cuffs like this was a meeting, not a threat. "You're forgetting something," he said softly. "I have money. I have donors. I have friends. I have my own fund, off books, black money, the kind you'll never touch." He said it like a confession, like a flex, like he couldn't help himself. And that was the thing about men like him. Arrogance makes them careless. They start to believe their secrets are proof of strength, not evidence of crime. I pulled my phone out. Not to call anyone, not to threaten, just to hold it between us, screen facing him. His smirk faltered when he saw the voice recorder timer still running. I watched understanding hit him in slow motion. His pupils tightened, his mouth parted like he was about to say something that would save him. Then he remembered every camera in the building, every witness in the hallway, every person who could repeat the story later. "You're recording me?" he hissed. "I'm documenting," I corrected. "It's what I do. It's what you taught me to do, actually. You always said the truth is whatever you can prove." For a beat, he looked like he might lunge again. Then he pivoted, sharp, fast, toward the ballroom doors. He was going back in to rewrite the narrative. I let him, because while he was obsessed with controlling the room, I was focused on controlling the outcome. My phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. I answered without hesitation. "This is Mara Vance," I said. A woman's voice came through, clipped and professional. "Miss Vance, this is Special Agent Lena Brooks with the State Office of Inspector General. We received your referral this morning. You indicated immediate risk of evidence destruction." "Yes," I said, keeping my voice level, "and immediate risk to an elderly family member being coerced." There was a pause, not doubt, but calculation. "Can you provide the address and current location of the family member?" I looked toward the ballroom doors. I could almost see my father stepping into the lights, already lifting his chin, already preparing his story about his ungrateful daughter. "My grandmother is at her assisted living residence. He has threatened eviction as retaliation." "Understood," Agent Brooks said. "We'll open a case file tonight. Stay available. Do not confront him further." I almost laughed. Too late. But I kept it to myself. "I'm available," I said. I ended the call and took one steady breath. Then I did the next thing my father never anticipated. I called my grandmother. She answered on the second ring, her voice thin but steady. "Mara?" "Hi, Grandma," I said, and softened my tone the way I always did with her. "Are you alone?" "A nurse is here. They're checking my blood pressure. Why do you sound like that?" "Because I need you to listen to me. Tonight, you're not going anywhere. No one is putting you out. If anyone comes to your door and says they're here on my behalf, you don't open it. You call the front desk and you call me. Do you understand?" There was a small pause, then a sigh that carried a lifetime of patience. "He's angry," she said. "I know," I whispered, "but he doesn't get to use you." Her voice softened. "He always did. With your mother, too." My throat tightened at the mention of my mother. That was a door I hadn't opened in a long time. "Grandma," I said carefully, "if there's anything you've never told me, anything you think could matter, I need you to hold on to it, and I need you to be safe." Another pause, longer this time, like she was walking through a memory she didn't like. "I have something," she admitted quietly, "in my drawer, an envelope. I never gave it to you because I thought you'd hate him forever if you knew." My stomach dropped and rose in the same second. "Don't touch it," I said immediately. "Just tell me it's there. That's enough for now." "All right," she said. "But Mara, don't let him make you cold." I swallowed hard. "I'm not cold. I'm clear." When I hung up, my hands were steady. My heart wasn't. Because an envelope in my grandmother's drawer meant history. It meant motive. It meant the kind of truth that doesn't just embarrass a man like my father, it destroys the foundation he built his image on. The ballroom doors opened again. My father strode out, and for a second he looked perfectly composed, like the humiliation hadn't happened. His expression carried that public smile, controlled, practiced, lethal. But his eyes were different now. They were the eyes of a man who realized the game had changed. "You think you're clever," he said softly, stepping into my space. "You think you can touch me with paperwork and recordings." He tilted his head. "Let's see how you like it when everyone in that room finds out what kind of person you really are." A cold line ran down my spine. There it was, the counterattack. Not with facts, not with law, with poison. I lifted my phone again and let him see the screen. The recorder was still running. "I'm ready," I said. He stared at me for a long, heavy moment. Then his smile sharpened into something cruel. "I'm ready too," he said. And he turned and walked away, back toward the light, already preparing to burn my name down. I stood alone in the corridor, breathing in disinfectant and steel, and understood the next truth. The first battle was won on stage. The war was about to be fought everywhere else. By the time I got back into the ballroom, my father was already doing what he did best, turning disaster into theater. He stood at the center of a small circle of donors and city officials, one hand pressed to his chest like a wounded saint. His voice carried just enough to draw nearby tables into listening range. "I'm devastated," he said. "I've spent my life giving back to this community, and tonight, my own daughter, who has struggled with instability, chose to make a scene." Instability. He didn't say the word like an accusation. He said it like a diagnosis. I felt heat climb my neck, but I kept my face still. The room was a living organism, and I could feel it shifting. People leaning in, trading glances, deciding what to believe. It was easier for them to believe in a dramatic, ungrateful daughter than in a respected surgeon siphoning public money. A woman in an emerald gown, one of his regular donors, touched his arm. "Richard, are you okay?" My father's smile cracked just enough to look vulnerable. "I'm fine. I just worry about her. I've tried to help her for years." He looked up and his eyes found mine across the room. The smile he wore in public was soft. The look he gave me was a blade. I didn't walk over. I didn't interrupt his story. I knew better than to wrestle a liar in front of an audience that wanted a show. If I fought him there, he'd win the only contest he cared about: attention. Instead, I headed straight to the side exit, where the event manager stood with a tablet and a headset, sweating through her blazer. "Ms. Vance," she said, voice tight, trying to sound professional while her night collapsed around her. "Dr. Hale asked that you—" "I'm leaving," I said. "But before I do, I need something." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "The donor list and the vendor invoices for tonight." Her lips parted. I can't give you that." I leaned in, kept my voice low and calm. "I'm not asking because I'm curious. I'm asking because an audit has been opened, and if those documents disappear, you'll be the first person they question." Her face drained of color. The tablet in her hand suddenly looked heavier. "I don't want any trouble," she whispered. "Then don't help trouble hide," I said. She hesitated, eyes darting toward my father across the room. Then she tapped the screen with shaking fingers and sent 2 files to my email. A small click, a digital paper trail. I gave her a single nod, thank you, without sentiment, and walked out before my father could corner me again. Outside, the January air cut clean through my lungs. The city looked the way it always did after a night like this. Glittering windows, quiet streets, expensive cars lined up like trophies. Somewhere behind those walls, people were still laughing, just softer now, like they were embarrassed to be caught. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. Unknown number again. "This is Mara Vance," I said. "Ms. Vance," Agent Lena Brooks said, "we have personnel en route to the assisted living residence. Your grandmother will be fine. We also have investigators headed to the Gala venue." A bitter relief loosened my ribs. "Thank you," I said. "Now listen carefully," she continued. "Dr. Hale's application triggered an expanded review. Your referral included potential misallocation, shell entities, and retaliation threats. If he attempts to contact you again, you do not engage. You document and report." "I understand." "Also," she added, tone changing slightly, "be prepared. He may retaliate by targeting your credibility." I almost laughed. He already started. "Then he's on schedule," she said. "Stay steady." The call ended, and I sat in my car for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Steady. That was the word everyone used when they didn't know how badly your bones were shaking. When I got home, I didn't even take my coat off. I opened my laptop, pulled up my work email, and found the first hit like a punch. A message from my director with the subject line, "Urgent, call me." I called immediately. She picked up on the first ring. "Mara, what happened tonight?" There was exhaustion in her voice, and something else, fear. "He submitted a fraudulent proposal," I said. "I denied it publicly because I had indicators of misconduct." "Richard Hale is calling everyone," she said, cutting me off. "He contacted the chair of the board, he contacted donors, he contacted a local reporter." Of course he did. "He says you have a personal vendetta. He says you're abusing your position. He hinted at mental health concerns." There it was again. Not an argument, a smear. I filed a referral to OIG this morning. They're opening a case. Silence. Then my director exhaled slowly. Mara, until this gets sorted, they're putting you on administrative leave. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. Are you serious? I'm trying to protect you, she said, and protect the foundation. You know how this works. Optics. Optics. The word people used when truth was inconvenient. I did everything by policy. I believe you, she said quietly, but the board is panicking. Hale is a name, a brand. They're scared. I closed my eyes for one long second, then opened them. Send me the leave notice, I said, in writing. After the call, I sat at my kitchen table while the house hummed with refrigerator noise and distant traffic. I wanted to slam my fist into something. I wanted to scream. Instead, I opened a fresh document and started building a timeline. Dates, emails, review notes, compliance flags, vendor connections, every phone call my father made, every threat he spoke in the corridor. Truth doesn't win by being true. Truth wins by being organized. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my grandmother. Mara, she said, voice shaky. 2 men came to my room, not staff. They said they were here to check on me. I didn't open the door. I called the desk like you told me. Cold flooded my veins. Did they leave? I asked. Yes, she whispered. But then a woman came with a badge. She said her name was Brooks. She sat with me. She told me I'm safe. I swallowed hard. You are safe, I repeated. You did everything right. There was a pause, then her voice dropped. The envelope, Mara. My stomach clenched. What about it? I opened the drawer because I was scared, she admitted. I wanted to make sure it was still there, and I saw the front. Your name is on it. My mouth dried up. My name? Yes, she said. And your mother's. The air in the room seemed to thin out a bit. What is it, Grandma? I asked, trying to keep my voice from breaking. What did you keep all these years? She inhaled, and when she spoke, her words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. It's not just about money, she said. It never was. Your father did something, years ago, something he made me swear I'd never tell. And I think tonight is why he's so desperate. My hands tightened around my phone. Tell me, I whispered. I can't say it over the phone, she said, almost pleading. But I can tell you this. If that envelope comes out, he doesn't just lose a grant. She paused. He loses everything. I stared at the dark window above my sink and saw my own reflection, wide eyes, pale face, the outline of a woman who thought she was fighting a financial scam, and realized she might be fighting something much worse. Then a new email popped onto my screen, from a local news outlet. Subject line, comment request involving your role and conduct. My father wasn't just trying to survive, he was trying to bury me first. I set the phone down slowly and opened the email with fingers that didn't feel like mine. Because now I understood the real game. He wasn't defending his reputation. He was defending a secret. The first thing I learned about public scandal is this. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. By sunrise, my father's story was everywhere, trimmed, polished, and served like gossip over coffee. A respected surgeon, a beloved philanthropist, betrayed by his own daughter, a bitter bureaucrat on a power trip. The article didn't call me unstable outright, but it didn't have to. It described my emotional outburst, my public disruption, my personal conflict of interest, and let the comments do the rest. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, the leave notice from the foundation glowing on the screen like an insult. Administrative leave, pending review, temporary, neutral language meant to feel fair. It didn't feel fair. It felt like the world was doing what it always did, protecting the man with the nicer suit. My phone buzzed again and again. Colleagues, old friends, a number I didn't recognize. I ignored all of it until a text came through from Agent Lena Brooks. OIG investigators executed a preservation order at the venue. Hale's team attempted to remove records. We stopped them. You were right. I exhaled so hard my shoulders shook. Then another text followed. We need you to come in today. Formal statement. Bring all documentation. I stared at the words until they settled into my bones. This was no longer a personal war. It was a case. I spent the next hour printing everything: emails, review notes, flagged line items, vendor invoices, the event manager's files, screenshots of the shell company registrations, even my own calendar entries. I labeled each stack. I put them in a binder the way I used to package evidence for compliance hearings. I dressed in plain black, no jewelry, hair pulled back, not because I wanted to look strong, because I wanted to look boring. Boring people don't look like they're acting out of revenge. Boring people look like they're telling the truth. The Office of Inspector General sat in a gray building that didn't care who your father was. No chandeliers, no velvet ropes, just fluorescent lights and quiet authority. Agent Brooks met me in the lobby. She was younger than I expected, with tired eyes and a posture that said she'd seen 100 men like my father swear they were the victim. "Ms. Vance," she said, offering a firm handshake, "thank you for coming in quickly." "Thank you for taking this seriously," I replied. "We're taking it seriously because your documentation is solid, and because his response last night confirmed intent." She led me into a small interview room. A recorder sat on the table, already running. Another agent, male, older, nodded at me and opened a file. "State your full name for the record," he said. "Mara Vance," I said. My voice didn't shake, not because I wasn't afraid, because I had nothing left to lose that mattered more than the truth. They walked me through the timeline. When I first saw the application, what I flagged, why I allowed preliminary approval, what was said in the corridor. I described my father's threats exactly, word for word, because manipulators live in vagueness. Precision kills them. When I finished, Agent Brooks slid a sheet of paper across the table. "This is the preservation order," she said. "His attorney contested it last night. We denied the request." She paused, then added, "He tried to have you disciplined before the order went through. He called your board chair. He called a state senator. He called a hospital executive. He also attempted to file a complaint alleging you falsified records." I felt my stomach turn, but my voice stayed flat. "Did it work?" "No," she said, "but he's escalating, which is why we're going to move quickly." The older agent leaned forward. "Do you have any reason to believe there are additional violations beyond financial misconduct?" I thought of my grandmother's voice, the envelope, my name and my mother's. "Yes," I said, "but I don't know what yet. I'm meeting my grandmother today." Agent Brooks nodded once. "We'll have an officer nearby, not to interfere, just to make sure she's safe." When I left the building, the winter sky was a hard, pale blue, the kind of sky that made everything look exposed. I drove straight to my grandmother's assisted living residence, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind racing. In the lobby, a receptionist smiled too brightly. "Ms. Vance? She's been expecting you." I found my grandmother in her small room by the window, a blanket across her knees. She looked fragile, but her eyes were sharp enough to survive a man like my father for decades. She reached for my hand the second I sat down. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have told you sooner." "You're telling me now. That's what matters." Her fingers tightened. "He made me swear. After your mother—" "Grandma," I said gently, "what's in the envelope?" She glanced toward the door like the walls might have ears, then reached into the top drawer of her nightstand. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a worn manila envelope, yellowed at the edges from years of hiding. My name was written on the front, in neat, old-fashioned script. So was my mother's. I took it carefully, like it might cut me. Inside were 3 things: a photocopy of a birth certificate, a letter, folded so many times the creases were soft, and a small flash drive taped to the paper with aging tape. My grandmother touched the letter with the tip of her finger. "Your mother wrote that," she said, "the night she left." My throat tightened. Left where? My grandmother swallowed. "She didn't leave, Mara. Not the way he told people." The room went quiet. Even the radiator seemed to hush. She pointed to the birth certificate. "Look at the father line." I unfolded it, and my breath stopped. The name on the father line wasn't Richard Hale. It was someone else, a name I didn't recognize. My hands went cold. "What is this?" My grandmother's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady, like she'd carried this truth so long it had turned into stone. "Richard is not your biological father," she said. "He married your mother after everything. He demanded your name, he demanded control, and when she tried to leave him, he threatened her." I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. "Threatened her how?" I whispered. My grandmother's gaze dropped to the flash drive. "Your mother recorded him," she said. "She was terrified. She hid it with me. She said if anything ever happened to her, I was to give it to you." The air felt too thin. "Did something happen to her?" I asked, though I already knew the answer I'd been living with. Car accident, sudden illness, tragedy with no questions asked. My grandmother didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just looked at me, and the silence answered for her. A cold, sharp clarity sliced through me. This wasn't just a grant scheme. This wasn't just a vanity center. This was a man who had been laundering his image for years, buying charity and applause to cover the rot underneath. My hands shook as I put the papers back in the envelope. "Grandma," I said, voice tight, "why give me this now?" "Because he's cornered," she said. "And cornered men don't just fight dirty, they destroy." I nodded slowly. Then I stood, walked to the small desk in her room, and pulled out my laptop. I didn't plug in the flash drive yet. Not here, not on an unsecured network, not with my grandmother in the room. But I did open my email and start typing. To Agent Brooks. Subject line: additional evidence. Immediate. My fingers moved fast, fueled by a calm that felt almost inhuman, because in that moment, something inside me shifted. I had spent my life trying to prove I was worth loving to a man who didn't know how to love anyone. I was done. I walked back to my grandmother and kissed her forehead. "You're not alone anymore," I told her. Then I turned to leave, envelope tucked under my arm like a verdict. In the hallway, my phone rang. Unknown number. I already knew who it was before I answered. "Mara," my father's voice said, soft, controlled, almost gentle. "We need to talk." I stopped walking. For a second, I pictured the ballroom again, the chandeliers, the laughter, the way he tried to kill me with words. And then I pictured the birth certificate, the letter, the flash drive. I smiled, but no one could see it. "No," I said quietly. "You need to listen." He paused. "Excuse me?" "I told you you wanted to know what kind of person I really am," I said. "You're about to find out." My voice stayed calm, not because I was cruel, because I was free. "I'm the person who's done being scared of you," I told him, "and I'm the person who just handed your secrets to the state." His breath caught, just once. Then for the first time in my life, I heard fear in my father's silence. I ended the call and kept walking. The truth was finally moving, and it was moving toward him. If you want more stories like this, where the powerful get exposed and the underestimated take their lives back, leave a comment and tell me what part hit you the hardest. And if you're enjoying these twists and payback endings, hit like and subscribe to my channel Still waters Payback.